Pisciotta.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I think we just ended with me at least saying you know where the Caltech submillimeter observatory and is.
And just for reference, I zoomed the image a little bit closer
Okay.
because it is almost invisible.
Yeah, that actually is more helpful. Okay. And then the JCMT.
Is number 10.
Okay. And then can you point me to the SMA?
The SMA is number 11.
Can you describe what the SMA is?
Excuse me. Your objection, Mr.
Your objection to the line of questioning was unduly repetitious. The document speaks for itself. We can all see it.
I think we're finally getting to a question, so you wanted him to say something about the SMA. What?
Yeah, can you tell us about what the SMA stands for, the Smithsonian Millimeter Array?
It's the submillimeter array.
Yes.
Run by Smithsonian, and it is consisting.
Sir, you need to put the microphone.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
It is consisting of a number of individual antennas that can actually be configured in different configurations, a compact configuration where they are all standing close together, and then various wide configurations where they can go out throughout the northern plateau. And there are pads throughout the northern plateau, and there's a track that can move the antennas there.
I'm sorry. There's a lot of chatter going on, and I understand that folks want to talk to each other. If it's necessary to do so, I'm going to ask that they go outside to talk because it's disruptive to the hearing. I cannot hear. Thank you. So go ahead, Ms. Pisciotta, your next question.
Yeah. Approximately how many pads are there in the SMA, where telescopes can be moved and situated?
I don't know exactly. More than 10, 15 maybe.
Okay. And about how many telescopes are there in the SMA array?
I believe 8.
8? And then pretty much the last question. Can you show me
May I have a short correction? You were asking how many telescopes there are. There are 8 antennas. There are not 8 telescopes.
Okay. Are you making a distinction between an antenna and a telescope?
Yes, the 8 antennas together form one telescope.
Would you agree that a telescope is basically an instrument that is a light collecting instrument or electromagnetic energy collecting instrument?
There are telescopes which are consisting of sub-apertures, and those sub-apertures can be distributed over any length of scale. So there is, for instance, the VLBA, as you may know, a very large baseline array, is also an antenna which is consisting of the total telescope is distributed all over the Earth, and it's one telescope.
Yeah, and my question really was, do you agree that the definition of a telescope is that it is a light collecting or electromagnetic collecting instrument used to collect electromagnetic energy?
No.
Okay.
You need several components for a telescope. You need the light collector, and you need the focal plane with the detectors. And together they make a telescope. And if the light collector is distributed over several apertures, there's still one detector in the center, and so that is one telescope.
Okay. So would you consider the JCMT, James Clerk Maxwell Submillimeter Radio Telescope, a telescope?
Yes.
Okay. And it's a dish, right? It's 10 meters?
It has a 10-meter dish.
Objection, relevance, argumentative.
Is this going someplace? I've asked you a few times, and I've given you a lot of leeway, but can we get to where you need to go?
Okay. Can you show me the VLBA up here? Show you what? The Very Long Baseline Array, the VLBA.
What is that? Is it a document?
No, it's a telescope.
Oh, on this map?
Yeah.
It's down here,
Number
12.
Yeah, number 12. Yeah. So you're familiar with the Caltech Submillimeter Observatory, is that right?
Yes.
And what is that?
Caltech Submillimeter Observatory is also a single dish radio telescope. It is one of the first submillimeter telescopes in the world. And it is now the one that has gone into decommissioning. It has stopped operating.
Yes, and did you know, are you aware that at one time the CSO and the JCMT did operate together?
Objection, relevance, call for an offer of proof.
Please, if you can get, what is the point?
The offer of proof is, well, I am personally one of the people who stood in the hole and pulled the cable between CSO and JCMT. I used to be a telescope system specialist at the JCMT, and I also worked at the CSO. And my question is, we operated as one telescope in the past.
So your testimony, when you're going to give it, would be evidence of that. This witness...
I need to know what if he knows about that. Is he aware of that?
No.
Okay, so here's the point. When you testified earlier with Ms. Ward, you said there were 13 telescopes. Now, if we counted all of those telescopes, but we didn't count the SMA as individual telescopes. So it contradicts your earlier testimony then, doesn't it?
No.
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled. Do you believe that?
No, it doesn't contradict. No, there are 13 telescopes. One telescope consists of these 8 antennas. Actually, you could question whether the VLBA is a telescope. It's an antenna too, so there may be only 12 telescopes and 1 antenna.
But you would recognize that the JCMT is a telescope
Yes,
and the CSO is a telescope.
yes.
You would recognize that both of those are actually interferometers too.
You can combine 2 telescopes to form 1 interferometer, but they would still stay individual telescopes. That's the same that has been done with the Keck telescopes. You can combine
Right.
their light to an interferometer, and that has been done, but they are still 2 individual telescopes because each of them can operate individually, whereas the SMA antennas, an individual SMA antenna cannot operate individually.
Well, it could technically, but it works more supremely as as an interferometer, correctly?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Okay, so if we counted them all together, how many would that be?
Objection,
Including the
asked and
SMAs.
answered.
I'm going to overrule. Go ahead. If you counted them all together, how many would that be?
How many what? How many telescopes or how many antennas?
All of the above.
No, you need to ask one question, right? So that he can answer, and then you can ask a second one.
Okay, well, he answered, I don't really understand how he's answering.
Ask him how many telescopes,
How many telescopes are there?
13.
how many antenna.
How many antenna?
9.
Okay. Can you give me an estimate of how big the SMA is, approximately in diameter?
I think in the largest configuration, it's about half a mile.
So it's half a mile across, and there's 8 antennas that work in sync.
Yes.
Do you think that that observatory would have the same impact as, say, the UH 0.9 meter telescope? Would it have the same footprint?
Objection, lack of foundation, calls for speculation.
I'm just asking a question.
Yes, ma'am, but can you lay the foundation? You've done a good job. So you have to establish that he would know this information, and then you ask the question.
Jean, can you read me the question that I just asked him, please?
Do you think that
Sorry.
could request to use this? Do you think that that observatory would have the same impact as, say, the UH 0.9 meter telescope? Would it have the same footprint?
So can you lay the foundation for that question, please?
Yes. I mean, yeah, that is my question. I'm not sure how to lay it any better than that. If the SMA's diameter is half a mile across, so that means the telescopes can be moved across an area that is half a mile across. And the UH 0.9 meter telescope, they do not have the same footprint. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that the SMA footprint is larger than the UH 0.9?
It's a matter of how you define footprint. If it is the square meters that are covered by concrete, then it is larger. But on the other hand, the telescopes can be moved around, so you only have a concrete pad, but no telescope there most of the time. So I would say it is depending on how you define footprint.
And how do they move? How are the SMA telescopes moved around onto the various pads?
There's a special designed truck that can pick them up and then drives them around to their different configurations.
And are each of the pads connected one to the other?
They are connected by optical fiber cable.
And does it go one to the other?
No, well, they are all individually connected to the central hub.
Okay. And so, what is your understanding of the 13 telescope limit?
I don't understand the question, sorry.
Objection, big and ambiguous, lack of foundation.
Yeah, could you establish what you mean by 13 scope limit, and also how this witness would know that information?
Well, he's the director of the Institute for Astronomy.
Well, sir, ma'am, I don't need you to tell me. I need you to ask him the question so that I know from him how he would know the answer to that question. That's foundation.
Okay. Is it your understanding that the reason for counting telescopes at all is to determine impact?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one last question. I think it's one. Uh-oh, I lost it again. Sorry, wait, where'd it go? I believe in your testimony, help me find it, sorry. I can't, just tell me the page because I can't. On page 6. On page 6, your testimony reads, as the highest peak in Hawaii, actually in all of Polynesia, Mauna Kea has enormous importance to Native Hawaiians and is among the most revered site in the state.
Yes.
So I wanted to go back to those questions. So when you hear people referring to building of the TMT on Mauna Kea as desecration, how does that make you feel?
Objection calls for a personal opinion beyond the scope of direct.
I'm going to overrule that, but can you break it down? So the question would be, have you heard people refer to the desecration of Mauna Kea? Sir?
Yes, yes, I heard that.
Then your next question.
And how does that make you feel as just a citizen of planet Earth?
I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Mahalo. I'm done.
All right, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ms. Pisciotta. Mr. Ching?
Clarence Ching.
Ku Ching.
Good day,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Hasinger. In your oral testimony, I believe you mentioned that your staff consists of 270 or so people?
Roughly 270 people, yes.
Thank you. Of this number of employees, how many of them are astronomers?
Roughly 50.
And how many may be just regular engineers?
Also roughly the same number.
And how many of your staff may be planners?
We don't have planners on the staff.
Thank you. You spoke about your Akamai program.
Yes.
How many PhDs has that program produced?
PhDs. The Akamai program does not produce PhDs. It is actually a workforce development program with people going to different companies to get experience about certain aspects and then to make a decision to go into technical jobs. So it's not a PhD program.
Would it be a bachelor's program, an undergraduate program?
No, it's a workforce development
Okay.
program.
So it's not strictly academic.
It's not an academic program, no.
Okay, you also mentioned in your testimony the term beginning of time. Now, you threw me on that one. Does that mean there is an ending of time?
I have written a book about that.
Really?
I'm happy to read that.
And may I ask you simply or briefly, what was your conclusion or whatever?
According to the modern understanding, there is no beginning or no ending of time. The universe is created out. It's actually very similar to the Kumulipu. It's created out of the nothingness, but the nothingness was already there before.
So your mention of the beginning of time was just sort of theoretical.
No, our own universe has a beginning with the Big Bang, and I was maybe sloppy, that is the time of our own universe, but there are other spaces which are outside our universe that were there before.
But when you mentioned it, you mentioned the term time.
Yes.
Okay. Do amateur astronomers perform a large function in the discovery of asteroids?
Yes, they do.
Could you say, do you have any idea of what proportion they may be playing
Yes,
in this role?
So the professional telescopes like Pan-STARRS or Catalina are discovering the asteroids on their first night of observation. So they already see something moving, and then they enter this into a database, and then the amateur astronomers around the world are following up these objects. And they are actually extremely important to pin down the orbit, because in the first discovery night you do not yet get a good orbit.
Yes.
And so amateur astronomers are following up, and there's a citizen science component in saving the Earth.
So when you talk about these giant segmented telescopes, are these telescopes specifically designed to look for asteroids?
They are not specifically designed to look for asteroids, but as I said before, they can have a very important role in the final determination of the exact location where that asteroid would pass by.
And if they would find a large asteroid that is on collision course with the Earth, what would they do?
So usually the big telescopes are not the ones who find the asteroids, but as we said, then the amateurs are coming. Then if an asteroid is determined to be a dangerous object, it would require further follow-up observations with bigger and bigger telescopes. And at some point, this has happened in the past, there were asteroids which were regarded dangerous, but then more and more accurate observations showed actually that they will pass by the Earth. And so far it was almost all clear.
My question goes to one that is on collision course with the Earth, not one passing close by.
Yeah.
Objection asked and answered, but asked for an offer of proof as to where this line of testimony is leading.
Where are we going, Mr. Ching?
I'm through, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Case? Let's see. Mr. Kaiama? Really? I'm kidding.
I want to join the party, Your Honor.
Happy to have you on board today.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Hasinger.
Good morning, Mr. Kaiama.
And forgive me if I said it wrong, your name.
No, that's fine.
And actually, I think we've met before, but is there something other than Dr. Hasinger that I can call you by?
Yes, please call me Gunther.
Thank you, Gunther.
Or Gunther, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Gunther. And before I begin the question, and forgive me, I'm going to direct my attention to the hearings officer, Amano. Ms. Amano, before I begin my questioning, I also wish to join the motion to strike the written direct testimony of Dr. Hasinger, Gunther. And the reason for joining the testimony, the motion to strike, is that I believe in his written direct testimony and in his testimony today, Dr. Hasinger testified as to either no or limited knowledge of the conservation district use laws and rules. And as such, it either one of two things. It permits a broader scope of cross-examination of his knowledge of this area. And I do believe certain prior cross-examiners sought to ask those questions, but were not allowed. But because of his limited knowledge, his professed limited knowledge, I think it does invite, or the Ms. Hearings Officer should consider a broader scope of cross-examination. And the reason is that because it goes to the weight and the credibility of his testimony. Additionally, as UH Hilo got up and objected, they said it was being offered, his testimony, as a means of meeting some of, I think he referenced 4 and 5 of the 8 criteria. Because, and unless, I think because when you're trying to meet the 8 criteria, it requires a certain level of understanding of knowledge of all the criteria and not being able to piecemeal what criteria they set forth. I think that if he lacks the knowledge that would not allow him to meet any of the other criteria, then I think it calls into question at least the relevance of that.
That doesn't make sense, I have to tell you, because otherwise the only witness who would testify is someone who could do all 8 criteria. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, but
So at least that's what I thought I heard you say.
Right. it is also important because some of his testimony did touch upon and did talk about not only the scientific, but the cultural impacts and the significance of that cultural impact.
Yes.
So again, it is being offered, and because it's being offered, I
If
think.
you're arguing my ruling on other people's examination, it's out of place.
Okay.
If you think that you can ask those questions, such as you wish, you have the right to do that. They have the right to object, the UH has the right to object, and then I'll make a ruling on that particular thing. But if we're talking about rulings that I've already made on other people's cross-examinations, it's taken out of context, because you might remember that I asked numerous times, where are we going? And that's all I needed. So if I'm not going to pre-rule anything, but
Right.
you're welcome to do your cross.
Okay, thank you.
So with regard to the motion to strike this witness's testimony, I'd like to entertain the university's response to that. If you could come to the microphone, please.
Dr. Hasinger's testimony goes to the 30-meter telescope project and how it will be involved with the future of astronomy on Mauna Kea, the unique characteristics of Mauna Kea, the unique astronomical characteristics of Mauna Kea, the 30-meter telescope's scientific, economic, and educational benefits to the community, and the relationship of astronomy to the management of Mauna Kea. In considering all of the 8 criteria, it is fair for the hearing officer and the land board to consider, as they evaluate, they are the ones that must understand the 8 criteria and apply the 8 criteria. It is not Dr. Hasinger that must understand the 8 criteria or apply the 8 criteria.
That's Dr. Hasinger.
I struggle with it.
I understand.
The witness can testify as to factual events or as to facts, which the hearing officer and the land board can then take into account as they evaluate the 8 criteria. It is they that have the burden of understanding and articulating that evaluation, not the witness. It is also well established by Hawaii courts that it is appropriate for the land board, and in this case the hearing officer, to consider scientific, economic, and educational benefits as they evaluate it as to whether or not a project falls within the purpose of the conservation district. Again, these are decisions, these are evaluations to be made by the hearing officer, not the witness.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to deny the motion to strike. And Mr. Sinkin, you'll have your opportunity during your cross-examination. Sir, you'll have your opportunity to object during your cross-examination to what he just said. And you can do that by renewing the motion. So, right, Mr. Shinyama? Right. So, Mr. Kaiama, I'm denying your motion to strike. The university this is their chance to put on information in support of their application. I have to take a look at it all. So I think the grounds that you laid out don't convince me that their information is something that I should not be considering. It's very material to the things that I have to consider. However, you did make a point about going into areas regarding the impeachment or credibility of the direct testimony and the witness. That's fair game. When I ask for an offer of proof, I need to know that. And certainly we have to lay the foundation before we can get there.
Yes, thank
All
you,
right,
Your Honor.
so go ahead.
And part of the reason I raised it, of course, was I think earlier Ms. Ward was attempting to ask questions, cross-examination questions about the 8 criteria, and she was not allowed. And of course, at that time, we weren't, of course, allowed to get up and make our objection. So I was merely stating that. And it is unusual because of the fact that we might have to wait till it's our turn to raise those kinds of points, because Ms. Ward is no longer on cross-examination. had those points been raised, Your Honor may have allowed her to ask more of those kinds of questions.
And each of those individuals represented to me that they were able to carry on their case on their own, and I'm accepting their representation. And I did tell you that during your turn for cross, you would have a chance to bring it up, and you have.
Right.
So if we can move on, that would be very helpful.
Yes.
No one's going to miss an opportunity. They just have to do it in turn,
Thank you, Your Honor.
okay?
Yes. Okay,
Okay,
Gunther.
Dexter.
All right. So you are the director of the Institute for Astronomy at the University of Hawaii?
I am.
Yes. Congratulations. How long have you held that position, sir?
6 3/4 of a year. Sorry, 5 3/4 of a year.
And before you held that, and before that, you held many different positions as set forth in your CV, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Have any of those positions been in the state of Hawaii?
No.
Okay. You state in your testimony that you are well acquainted with the TMT project, as well as the role the TMT project will play in the future of astronomy on Mauna Kea.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And forgive me, but I do believe you may have answered this question. You did write this testimony yourself?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Okay. What did you do to become acquainted with the project?
You mean with the TMT project?
Yes, sir.
I became acquainted with the project through many discussions I had, through reading, and that's it.
I'm sorry, what was that second word?
Through reading.
Oh, reading, okay. In your becoming acquainted with the project, did you also have discussions, which you mentioned, with representatives of the TMT?
Yes.
Did you also have discussions with a legal counsel representing the TMT?
No.
And forgive me, but I'm going to ask the question, and you help me if you can answer it. Did you do any of that work yourself? And let me clarify if you're not, well, do you understand my question first?
Objection.
Yes.
Objection. Lack of foundation, vague and ambiguous.
I was going to ask for what you mean by work,
Yes, yes.
please.
Okay, let me clarify that. My apologies. Did you do any of the work in the development of the TMT project yourself?
No.
Have you ever visited the site of the proposed location for the TMT?
Yes.
Have you ever yourself personally spoken to any of the cultural practitioners or protectors up on Mauna Kea to understand their point of view?
Yes.
Okay. Who did you speak to?
I talked to Lanakila.
Okay.
When you say up on Mauna Kea, they were not all up on Mauna Kea, they were also down. I talked to Jan Osorio, Lili Kala.
Pronounce it clearly.
Lili Kala, I can't pronounce her second name.
Kame'elehiwa.
Kame'elehiwa.
Yes.
Can you spell that for us, please?
K-A-M-E, Okina-E, L-E-I-H-I-W-A.
Thank you.
I believe. I may have misspelled that. So.
It's okay.
And
Yes.
I also think I talked to Brandon Kealoha.
Okay.
Come on, sorry.
And when you spoke to Lanakila, what was his opinion that he expressed to you about this construction of TMT on Mauna Kea?
He was against the construction.
Okay. When you spoke with John Osorio about the construction of TNT on Mauna Kea? What was his opinion?
He was also against the construction.
When you spoke with Lili Kala about the construction of TMT on Mauna Kea, what was her opinion?
They were also against the construction.
And-
Sorry, you were asking me whether I was talking to some of the protectors. They were selected to be against the construction. I also talked to many other Hawaiians which were not against the construction, but I only specifically told you the ones which were against.
Of
So
course,
they were all against.
because that's the question I asked you.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. And the same last one, when you spoke with Kamahana, Brandon, about the construction of TMT on Mauna Kea, what was his opinion?
I think when we spoke, it was more exploratory, and it was more about long-term vision.
Thank you. Thank you, Gunther.
During your turn, you will.
You'll have your turn.
Take notes, sir. Take notes. You'll have a chance to question him about that.
Okay. Gunther, forgive this question, but I'm going to ask it. Do you stand to gain personally from the building of the TMT?
No,
Okay, and I don't mean just financial.
no.
Okay,
I'm afraid by the time the TMT will operate, I will already be retired.
okay, thank you.
It's not all it's cracked up to be.
Well, you're not saying you're retired, Judge, right?
Just saying,
Because you're the most retired person I know. Okay. Let me move on, Gunther. Have you done any analysis of the impact that TMT will have on the environment? Let me ask it one at a time. Have you done any analysis of the impacts that TMT will have on the environment?
No,
Same question, but different, just modified. Have you done any analysis of the impacts that TMT will have on cultural or religious practices on Mauna Kea?
no,
Thank you, sir. Have you analyzed whether the TMT will cause substantial adverse impact to existing natural resources in the area?
no, I didn't.
Have you analyzed whether the TMT will increase the intensity of land use in the area?
No,
Thank you, sir. Have you analyzed whether the TMT will have a detrimental effect on public health? Let me finish that. I was wondering whether it'd be a combination question, but I'll ask it, and then your counsel can object if he wants to. Have you analyzed whether the TMT will have a detrimental effect on public health, safety, or welfare for the residents of Hawaii?
no, I have not analyzed that.
Thank you, sir. Okay. You say in your written testimony that Mauna Kea is one of the best viewing locations in the world.
Yes, I do.
Okay. But are there other possible sites to build a telescope of similar magnitude?
You mean on Mauna Kea?
Okay, let me rephrase the question. Thank you for that. Okay. Are there other possible sites around the world to build a telescope similar to the magnitude of the TMT?
Objection, asked and answered.
it has been answered, but when you say magnitude, is that something different?
I guess it has the capabilities of the TMT, was what I mean by magnitude.
So what I heard this witness say earlier is there are scopes in the southern hemisphere, but nothing in the northern hemisphere. That's what I heard. So I think that's why the objection is asked and answered.
Okay,
If I may, I would still like to answer that question because there is some information that may be useful for all of us, and that is would be good to get into the record.
I'm fine with that, but I don't know that your attorney wants you to answer that.
We'll go ahead and allow
Yeah.
you to answer.
So,
His counsel is shaking his head, coaching him.
No, no. I'm not looking at him, sorry.
Excuse me, a lot of people are shaking their head. But, excuse me, I was watching the witness and he wasn't looking in that direction.
No.
Well, that's your representation, but that's not something I have observed. It's certainly not with this witness at this time. Mr. Kaiama, if you would like to add to that, that's up to you.
Well, Your Honor, I can't say that I know because my back is facing to counsel, and
Well, is this witness looking at you or someone else?
Mr. Gunther and I have been making good eye contact.
Yes.
So if that
That's-
answers your question, I mean, so I don't know. I
That
think
is
he's looking at me.
Okay.
But I do know that
Let's not
counsel
go too
is,
far on that.
I do
That's-
know that counsel is just off to my side. So that's all I can say about that.
I would like
He's six-
permission from the council to answer that question despite the,
I apologize for fidgeting. Please answer the question.
okay. The reason why Mauna Kea is such a strong mountain for astronomy as well is...
I need to actually, Gunther, stop you right there. Because that wasn't really my question.
No, but-
So I do understand that.
Objection. The cross-examiner should allow the witness to answer the
But it's
question.
non-responsive to the question, Your Honor.
No, it is.
No, it is a yes and no question.
Objection. It is
Excuse
not for
me,
the...
I'm going to overrule the objection. The witness believes his response is responsive to your question. I think we should allow him to say what he needs to say.
Okay, and I just was saying, I believe the question I asked was a yes or no question.
No, you said something about a similar magnitude, and so I have to compare magnitudes with each other. And
Okay.
so, and in order to compare magnitudes, I have to say something about the specific geography of the mountain that we want to put the telescope on. The reason why Mauna Kea is such a great mountain is because it has this flat, we have the shield volcano, which has a flat slope, and when the wind is blowing over the ocean, we are sitting in the middle of the ocean, 2,500 miles, nothing else around, so when the wind is coming, it is coming in a very organized fashion. And the shape of the Mauna Kea mountains allows the wind to blow over it in a so-called laminar.
We will be testing the fire alarm system on the hotel. It's only a test.
Okay.
It will continue on and on for the next hour.
I think it's fine. So what I just wanted to say is that the wind is a laminar stream, and that means that the stars don't twinkle that much over Mauna Kea. And this is a unique property that only Hawaii has. So Chile, for instance, does not have that. And when the wind is coming there are turbulences. And so the air is actually more volatile, more turbulent. And so indeed you can build a telescope in Chile, but you need to make it bigger in order to have the same power that a 30-meter telescope has on Mauna Kea. So there is a telescope in Chile that's 39 meters, but the power of Mauna Kea actually helps us to get a stronger telescope with a 30-meter.
Okay, thank you.
Mauna Kea.
I object, Your Honor.
Recess, Your Honor?
I don't have a problem taking a recess, but I don't know how long it's so why don't we take a 5-minute break and hope for the best.
contested case hearing for the 30-meter telescope project, a proceeding for the State of Hawaii DLNR's Board of Land and Natural Resources.
You're watching Naleo TV.
I'm really admiring how you are typing while we speak.
Oh, I'm typing horribly.
Okay.
My fingers forget what they type.
If we can please resume.
I read when they say when you read that back, you think, God, I
Shoot, yes.
We've checked with the front desk of the hotel, and it looks like they've managed to turn off the alarm for this room, so we should be able to continue. So I apologize for the interruption, and Dr. Hasinger, your testimony will continue under the oath you took earlier to tell the truth. Do you understand, sir?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Kaiama, please continue with your cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Gunther?
Yes.
Yes, hi. You state in your written testimony that the TMT will enable scientific breakthroughs in several of the most fundamental questions. What is the universe made of? How did it form? How do stars and planets form? Where did we come from? Where will we go to? Is there life in the universe? My question is, in rendering your opinion, did you take into account whether the TMT would interfere with the Hawaiians' ability to study these same questions based on their cultural and religious practices on the Mauna?
In this question, or in the statement that the TMT will make these breakthrough discoveries, I did not take that into account.
Thank you, sir. Or do you think, or did you think, or well, let me stop, I'll strike that, I'll start it again. Do you think that would be an important thing to consider?
Yes.
Thank you. You state in your written testimony that in the current controversy about the construction of the TMT, it is important to ask, what do the local and Hawaiian communities get out of the telescopes on Mauna Kea? I think that's on page 2 of your written testimony.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think you've already asked it, but let me state it in a more direct way. You've already said, sir, that you've only spoken to the 4 people you spoke, that you mentioned earlier about, and the protectors and the cultural practices on Mauna Kea. That is correct.
No, those were not the
Objection,
only.
improper characterization of prior testimony.
Yeah, could you ask the question more accurately, please?
And forgive me, my mistake. I did ask earlier with respect to another question, but it would apply to this question. Have you asked any of the cultural practitioners or protectors on the Mauna that question? And I believe, sir, your answer was you spoke with respect to that question that you mentioned the 4 people you mentioned earlier.
No, the 4 people that I mentioned earlier were some of those that I remembered vividly, but I think I had several other opportunities. I was a member of panel discussions where both sides were present, and so I just don't remember all of these partners that we didn't speak in a 2-by-2 way, but we spoke in a forum with the public present.
So you're saying you were in some panel discussion that discussed this issue, and you believe while you were in that panel discussion, there were other either traditional cultural practitioners or protectors of the Mauna at that?
Yes.
Okay. But you can't name them as you stand here?
Right now, I don't remember them.
Okay, thank you. You say that several astronomical objects and structures have been given Hawaiian names.
Yes.
Do you think that's important to the Hawaiians?
I believe that is important, at least to some Hawaiians.
And sir, how do you know that? Is that from personal knowledge?
It is from discussions and from ideas that were brought to us. And I think it is a reference to the host of the telescopes that those names should also be reflecting the honor and the reverence that the telescopes are making to that culture.
Good answer, thank you. You state in your testimony that the observatory and IFA were funded with the explicit dual goals of providing more educational opportunities to Hawaiian students and to develop astronomy as an economic driver for the state of Hawaii, in particular for Hawaii Island.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know how many scientists that currently work on observatories on the Mauna are of Hawaiian descent?
When you refer to scientists, to astronomers?
Yes.
And to those who work on the Mauna,
yes.
0. But we have Hawaiian astronomers that are working on the sea level, and they are going up to the Mauna every once in a while. But there are right now only a very small number of native Hawaiian PhD astronomers. One of them is Paul Coleman, and the other one, which we have just graduated, is Heather Kaluna.
Okay, thank you.
And we are working on the pipeline, so we hope very much to strengthen that thread.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything in the current permit application, if you know, that mandates that a certain number or percentage of people of Hawaiian descent be hired as scientists for the TMT?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Help me with this, Gunther. Where are you from, Gunther?
I'm originally from Oberammergau in Germany. I'm born in Oberammergau,
okay,
which is a village in Bavaria south of Munich.
Say that one more time.
Oberammergau.
And you finished, it was...
it is a village in Germany south of Munich, about 100 kilometers south of Munich.
Thank you. Since I know you just a little bit, and some have been in conversations, social conversations, I don't know, so you are German, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is the culture of the German people? The place
Objection
you are from.
overbroad, vague, and ambiguous.
What do you mean by culture?
Okay. Can you tell me, well, let me get to my question, and if we need to, I can backtrack on that. Are there any areas or sites in your country, Germany, that while in all other respect is suitable for construction, construction is prohibited because of the sacredness of that area or site?
In the area that I come from, Bavaria, there was actually a construction planned of a windmill on a ridge somewhere near the city of Aschaffenburg. And then some people claimed that this is a sacred ridge and the windmill should not be built but the sacredness of that ridge was not established as a reference in, I mean, so not everybody, there were just a few people who claimed that, and so I think they did not succeed in stopping the windmill.
So, and just to ask again, I think, do you know, do you know of any areas or sites? That same question, where in all other respects is suitable for construction, but construction is not undertaken because of the sacredness of that area or site?
Objection asked and answered.
No, that
Sir,
would,
when the lawyer stands up, if you don't mind, he's going to make an objection.
Yes, sorry.
I need to rule on it. So your objection is asked and answered, and I'm going to sustain that, strike the last response.
okay, and I would, Your Honor, my response would be is that that's not, he did not answer the question the first time around. He spoke about what other people had mentioned was sacred areas, and so, and this one was, what did he know? And
All
he
right.
said his answer was no.
So your second question was, do you have a personal knowledge of this?
That is correct.
Okay, that is a different question, and I'll allow that.
Yes.
Do you have personal
And
knowledge?
Judge, I just wanted to say that I'm focusing on Dexter, and so I don't always see when Ian stands up, so sorry for being too late.
That's a good answer.
But Mr. Kaiama, if you see Mr. Sanderson out of the corner of your eye, stand up. Can you signal the witness not to answer?
Okay, I will try, but again, I don't always see him, and so.
All
It's
right.
fine. I will try to.
Because I'm focusing on Gunther as well.
I'm glad for the two of you. Go ahead.
All right, okay. You say in your testimony that this segment of the Big Island economy will grow considerably with the construction of TMT.
Yes.
Okay. Can you be more specific?
There are only estimates, but so far the economic benefit to the whole state of Hawaii per year is about $170 million. About 90 million of those is ending up on the island of Hawaii. And a rough guess is that maybe 30% more will end up when the TMT will be built, just based on the number of people and the total amount of money involved. But that's my own personal guess.
And what is, oh, okay. That makes me worried when you say that's your own personal guess. So, because I have to ask the next question. So what is that information based on?
So basically the information on the economic benefit is based on a model that is run by UHERO at the University of Hawaii, with a lot of complicated input and output factors. And so I do not, I mean, it's clear that nobody has made that analysis because it only is done after the fact.
Okay,
And so
your knowledge is based on that report?
It's based on that report and on my kind of gut feeling about extrapolations based on the volume of operating funds involved and construction funds involved.
Do you personally know how many jobs will be created by this project?
Not exactly.
Okay. Do you personally know what kind of jobs will be created by this project?
I can judge.
No, I don't want you to guess, sir. Okay. Okay. You talk about finding a balance between scientific exploration on Mauna Kea and its cultural and spiritual significance to many people.
Yes.
Who are you referring to? Or let me strike that. Here's my question. Are you referring to the native people, Kanaka Maoli, of Hawaii, when you talk about the cultural and significance, spiritual significance to many people?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So Gunther, isn't it true though, and I think you've mentioned that already in some of the answers to the questions, isn't it true that you don't have the sufficient knowledge of cultural and spiritual significance to make that determination?
I don't make that determination. I just said that it would be advisable or would be necessary or important to find a balance. But what that balance is not to my judgment.
I see. Okay. I'm coming to close to an end. I just have a few more questions. Okay. Oops. Okay. Gunther, you write on page 5 of your written direct testimony that the fascination of astronomical research attracts a whole generation of children into a world of science to learn the tools of mathematics and science. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what does STEM stand for? S-T-E-M.
It's science, technology. What does E stand for? Somebody help me. Engineering and mathematics.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. Science,
Yeah.
technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Okay, thank you. To your knowledge, sir, did Native Hawaiians have their own tradition of scientific knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. To the best of your knowledge, what would those forms of science be, if you know?
They were, for instance, some of the best astronomers of their time. The fact that we are here is because an astronomer led us here. They were very good in sensing the currents of the ocean. They were very good in using land from Mauna Kea to Makai. They have very good ways of sustainable fishery, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of things that I have read about or I have seen.
Thank you, sir. Did Hawaiians have names for the stars and the planets?
Yes.
Okay. Did they track the movement of and analyze the stars and the planets?
They actually did not so much look at the moving stars, but they were using the fixed stars as a reference for the navigation.
Thank you for that correction. Would those traditional Hawaiian forms of knowledge be considered scientific?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you know that there has been a resurgence of the Native Hawaiian traditional scientific knowledges regarding the restoration of lo'ikalo, taro cultivation, loko'i'a, fish ponds, and auwai water systems?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Would these Hawaiian forms of traditional scientific knowledge teach us about science, technology, engineering, mathematics?
In a limited form, yes.
Okay. How would you define, sir, technology?
Technology, from my point of view, is at any current moment the development of tools in order to help you further your life. So from my point of view, the Polynesian voyagers hundreds of years ago were the best technologists of their life. They used and had to use the best technology that was available to them, otherwise they would not survive. And we are doing the same now.
Thank you, sir. Do you know if technology can also be defined as machinery and equipment developed from the application of scientific knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. To your knowledge, would the building of fish ponds employ technology?
Yes.
Okay, same, would the building of Hawaiian waterways, the auwai system, employ technology?
Yes.
Would the Hawaiian traditional scientific measurements of stars across the sky employ technology?
To a certain aspect, yes.
Okay, thank you. Oops. Do you know if Native Hawaiians built structures on Mauna Kea for the viewing of the stars and planets?
I believe I have seen something like an observing chair and some stones in a similar arrangement to Stonehenge, which was used to observe the stars, so I believe yes.
Okay. interesting reference to Stonehenge, but I don't know enough to ask you, so I'll leave it there. In your written direct testimony on page 5, you write that the TMT's community efforts, together with matching funds from private donors, provide generous support to strengthen this education pipeline across a broad range of activities.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Gunther, to your knowledge, are Hawaiian traditional scientific forms of knowledge taught in the STEM program?
I don't know in detail,
Okay.
but I would guess that this is true because it is a way of bringing the kids to the knowledge. You start from, I mean, at some other point I say we are standing on the shoulders of giants. You always have to give your foundation, and the foundation in this sense is the Hawaiian knowledge, and then you explain to them how to move on.
Thank you for your explanation. But I think your first part is that you're not sure, though, right?
I'm not certain. No.
Okay, thank you. In your opinion, is Hawaiian traditional scientific knowledge respected as a form of science?
That's too broad a question.
Okay. And I guess I could ask you with respect to local i'a, kalo cultivation, and auwai, as well as the movement of the stars. So if I asked you in one order, you know, one after the other, well, let me strike that. I'll ask the question. In your in your opinion, is the Hawaiian traditional scientific knowledge, as it applies to kalo cultivation, respected as a form of science?
The broadness of the question for me is respected because I think one has to quantify that. Only the people who know about it respect it. Not everybody knows about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So for yourself?
I respect it.
Okay. And that would be the same for auwai, local fish ponds, and stars in the sky?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you have an opportunity to read the TMT Cultural Impact Assessment?
No.
Okay, thank you. On page 7 of your written direct testimony, you state that the TMT has opened up a new era which will allow even better mountain management in the future and hopefully improve the balance between culture and science on Mauna Kea. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Fine question, but how would you define balance?
Balance. Again, I mean, I said that is something that I personally can define for myself, but that has to be defined by a process that is involving both sides.
Okay. So for you, it's at this point more of an aspiration then?
Yes. I'd say hopefully improve the balance.
Okay. Would you know, sir, if there is well, let me ask the foundational question. Have we ever established Hawaiian culture is scientific? Is there then necessarily a conflict between Hawaiian culture and science?
I would say there is no conflict between Hawaiian culture and science. The conflict may be between the fact that science is moving forward, and so Hawaiian culture is a basis of many developments, but even during the Hawaiian times, the Hawaiian culture was developing, so it's still developing, and we are developing on top of that.
Okay, thank you. Are you aware, sir, Gunther, that the majority of community participants in the TMT CIA process, actually, let me strike that question, because you said you have not read the TMT CIA. Okay. Gunther, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I have completed my examinations, cross-examinations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiama.
Yeah.
Mr. Fergestrom?
Good morning, Gunther.
Good morning.
You are the director of the Institute for Astronomy, is that correct?
Yes.
In the astronomy department, are you folks linked up with the Research Corporation of the university?
RCUH?
RCUH, yes.
We are using RCUH as an element of our operation. So some of our people are employed through RCUH, and some of the projects are also managed through RCUH.
Okay. To your knowledge, is there military applications to the building of the 30-meter telescope?
Excuse me, I didn't understand the question.
I said, to your knowledge, do you know if there's military applications to the 30-meter telescope?
To my knowledge, no.
To your knowledge, is the military funding any of the building of the optics and other materials, other equipment that's going to be used in the telescope?
I don't know. Sorry.
No. Fine. I'm going to try to do this very carefully and not to annoy everybody, but I have to figure out how to get this in. Do you know if the 30-meter telescope is using federal funds in its development?
No.
You do not know, or no, they are not?
I only know what I heard so far, no.
As the director of the Institute for Astronomy, you're well aware of the conditions that are set in the CDUA, in specifics, that the state of Hawaii is the owner of that property?
Yes.
And how is that determined?
Objection, lack of foundation.
Yeah, could you set the foundation? I'm not
Sure.
quite sure. To what degree is this witness familiar with the CDUA? And then you're
Okay.
asking him about this state of Hawaii. So
Okay.
how is he going to know this?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but as the director of the Institute of Astronomy, you folks are involved with the development of astronomical facilities on Mauna Kea. Is that correct?
Only in the sense of scientific strategic planning and long-term visioning. We are not involved in the direct application.
Okay. Are you involved in the acceptance or the sign-off, let's say, of the conditions that are necessary for the CDUA?
No.
No. I was very interested in your comment about how Hawaiians only, well, you pretty much said they limited their astronomical observations to fixed stars, but they did not track moving stars. Is that correct?
At least as far as I know, I don't know much more. I mean, they gave also Hawaiian names to the moving stars, but what I said is that they established a coordinate grid of fixed stars which they used for their navigation, and they could not use the moving stars for the navigation.
How do you know that?
I talked to Kalepa Babayan, I talked to Nainoa Thompson, I learned something from them. I also read how Nainoa Thompson learned Hawaiian navigation. And we are also teaching Hawaiian navigation, and part of our astronomy curriculum is including Hawaiian navigation.
In that curriculum, do you also include what we term as Papa Kilahoku or star priests?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you include the knowledge of a Papa Kilahoku, which is the Hawaiian star priest?
Not directly. I know about them.
Do you think it would be advantageous to your endeavors of understanding the stars to talk to people who have been watching them for thousands of years?
I think it's very, sorry.
Objection, argumentative.
I think the answer's been given already, so go ahead.
Maybe I didn't quite understand. You said, is it advantageous?
Yeah.
I think it is advantageous.
Yes. So, okay, if you think it's advantageous, can you tell me of any efforts you're making to bring that knowledge into the university system?
Yes, so as I said, we have it as part of our curriculum. We also are using it as part of our outreach efforts. So, for instance, I personally went up to Volcanoes National Park at BioBlitz, and we brought a planetarium, and then we brought the masses in and explained to them the Hawaiian star lines, and then this is actually a very nice bridge for explaining them the star lines or the galaxy lines which lie beyond the Hawaiian star lines.
Let's see. So your knowledge of Hawaiian star navigation, or that what you're teaching in the schools, you said you were employing traditional Hawaiian navigational stuff, and I guess you're relating it to stars that Hawaiians used in the mapping of the sky.
Yes.
Is that correct?
And maybe just for explanation, I mean, what we know today about the Hawaiian star lines has been developed. It has been lost in between, and it has been redeveloped, and part of the redevelopment actually involved planetarium, Bishop Museum, astronomers, so Hawaiian astronomers and Western astronomers were working together to recreate the knowledge about the Hawaiian star lines.
The reason I ask is that from what I understand and what I've seen thus far in planetariums and stuff like that, everything is in reference to Greek, Roman gods or glyphs, and not any reference to Hawaiian star glyphs.
Objection, witnesses testifying, argumentative.
Is there a question?
Yeah, the question is, are you going to employ that kind of information? Because I think it's very, very important for the
Sir, you
astronomy.
want to ask the question?
Okay.
I think your question was, are you going to employ?
Yeah, do you plan to include traditional Hawaiian star knowledge in your academics in understanding or teaching, teaching of the STEM type projects?
I already answered that, yes, we do that.
I think you answered this before, but I'm going to ask it again because I'm going to build to something. So do you consider the summit of Mauna Kea sacred to the Hawaiian people?
Do I consider it sacred, or do Hawaiian people consider it sacred? What is the question?
Well, I guess it's a twofold question because, yes,
It's a
do you
compound,
consider...
Sorry, it's a compound question.
Okay, so let me break it down a little bit. From your knowledge, do you have an understanding that a lot of Hawaiian people consider the summit of Mauna Kea to be extremely sacred?
Yes.
Do you also, is it in your knowledge that it was so sacred that people were not allowed to be there?
That is the history. Some people were not allowed to be there.
So in your knowledge of, I guess you could call sanctity of religious sites, would you consider, let me see, does science trump Hawaiian traditional religious knowledge?
Objection beyond the scope of direct argumentative.
Where are we going with this?
I'm trying to establish whether or not Hawaiian is just a simple thought on the side, or if they actually include that in their understanding of the sanctity of the summit of Mauna Kea.
Who's they?
Institute of Astronomy, University of Hawaii.
Okay, so maybe you can re-ask the question?
Okay. Given the information that you've given so far about your understanding that Mauna Kea is sacred to many Hawaiians, and even the knowledge that it was so sacred that people were not allowed to go there.
You said the summit.
The summit, yes.
Yep.
Yes. And so, is there a place in your scientific understanding that it's okay to go into some place that is sacred to somebody else and build something that it, and go to places that people are not allowed to go because of its sanctity? I guess I could say it this way. Do you think it would be okay for you to walk into a Buddhist temple and say, I'm going to put up a telescope here?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
Okay. Excuse me, I'm trying to figure out a way to ask the question since I keep running into these objections. Would it be true to say that in your testimony, you talk about all these things in the future, that TMT will be 100 times or 10 times greater, 100 times more sensitive than the current telescopes?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a true statement or is that speculative?
No, that's a true statement.
And what is that based on?
So I was referring to the fact that the collecting area is 10 times bigger than, for instance, the Keck telescope. The diameter is 3 times bigger. Collecting area is 10 times bigger, so we are collecting 10 times more photons. At the same time, the angle, the opening angle of the telescope is bigger, and so we get sharper images. And the sensitivity, that means our ability to see something, depends on the number of photons we collect, but also how sharp the images are. And so those two factors of 10 are joining, and there's a factor of 100 for some of the most important applications. So for instance, to look and find another Earth-like planet and then to image it, that is only possible with this 100 times more sensitivity.
To your knowledge, is the various, or the 13 different telescopes, are they proprietary to that company or that country that put it up there?
What means proprietary? They are owned by individual organizations. Some of them are owned by countries like Japan, Subaru. Some are owned by universities. Some are owned by our own university. So each of them has an owner.
So that information that they collect in their individual telescopes are proprietary?
Oh, but no, the information that the telescopes collect is not proprietary. The information will actually be made public after a short, I mean, there is a so-called proprietary period where the individual astronomer has single access to his data, but then after a year or after 1.5 years, this all goes into a public archive and everybody in the whole world has access to that data.
Okay. So the whole idea of a 30-meter telescope is to create a large base in which you can gather light. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's what all the other telescopes are doing also. Is that correct?
Each of them collects light, yes.
And can you help clarify what it means to have what's it called? Interferometers. Yes.
Interferometry.
Yes.
Yeah, so interferometry is actually where you do not have one big dish that collects light. I mean, before I said you need more photons, but you also need a larger separation, and those two factors work together. Sometimes you cannot afford to build a mile-wide telescope, so you do interferometry where you basically cut the aperture into several small pieces. Then you don't have the benefit of collecting more light, but at least you have the benefit of the large distance, and so you can see sharper. So an interferometer can see much sharper, but not necessarily further away because it doesn't collect as many photons as a big telescope.
Would it be safe to say that the 13 telescopes already up there can be functioning as an interferometer?
No, unfortunately not.
Why?
Because the technology for optical, I mean, they're working in the visual and infrared light, and the technology for interferometry is dependent on the length of the wavelengths. So it is relatively easy to make a radio interferometer because the wavelength is long, but when the optical wavelength gets very short, an interferometer is getting very difficult. So Keck is no longer able to do an interferometer between the two Keck telescopes, but it is unthinkable that some of the other telescopes could be connected as an interferometer. That is a dream for the future, that you are building a technology that can actually connect telescopes as an interferometer. In the optical, in the visuals. In the radio, as we have discussed with the SMA or the VLBA, it is working, but not in the visual band.
But that technology could be developed, is that correct?
There are some dreams, and so for instance, Keck has already shown that it is possible, but then they stopped this branch of development. Our friends in Chile, the European Southern Observatory, is currently operating an interferometer between 4 8-meter telescopes and 4 smaller telescopes. They have a baseline of about 120 meters. That's the maximum that you could think of. But I think for the future, maybe the next 50 years, there are ideas to develop optical interferometers. So you could think of something like the SMA, but not made of radio telescopes, but of optical telescopes. But something like that is not considered for Mauna Kea.
Why? Why is that not considered for Mauna Kea?
It's basically beyond our current thinking. It probably takes another 50 years to go there. So we all will be not active anymore at that time.
Let me see if I got this right. You're saying that they're already using interferometer type arrangements with different telescopes in different areas?
Yes, I said, I mean, the Keck telescope was using interferometry. The very large telescope in Chile is using interferometry. The Keck has actually stopped interferometry for 2 reasons. One, they exploited what they could do with the 2 telescopes. They would need the outriggers, which they don't have, so they cannot really make the full image. And so therefore, they decided to stop this interferometry branch, and the interferometry is now only done in Chile. But as I said, interferometry is something different. It cannot replace the collecting area. It cannot look at the distant objects, for instance. And so it's like I said, the telescopes are like instruments in an orchestra, and each has a separate role and a separate tune.
But they still make an orchestra.
And they still make music, yes.
And so I'm having a hard time understanding. With the telescopes that are existing, I don't understand why there's an insistence on a 30-meter telescope when what you're really trying to accomplish can be actually accomplished by an idea of interferometry.
Do not answer.
Objection, argumentative.
You're arguing with the witness.
Well, okay.
Also, he already explained to you why he believes it is not adequate. So please move to the next area.
Okay. You make a statement on page 2 that reaching further into the universe enables you to look back in time, and the TMT was therefore like a time machine.
Yes.
Do you know the Kumulipo?
Yes.
Is that like a time machine?
Kumulipo describes how things have been formed from the beginning to now. And I would say it's not a time machine, it's a description, it's a generation chant, and it describes the Hawaiian belief how things have formed. And I found it very interesting that some of these beliefs are in principle the same ideas of modern cosmology. But the time machine means that you can actually go back and look at some of these elements that have been created, and you can actually then confirm or learn more about it.
You said that you do have knowledge that some Hawaiians believe the summit of Mauna Kea to be very, very sacred. Is
Yes.
that true? Do you have knowledge that there are very few Native Hawaiian sites on Mauna Kea? On the summit area, I'm sorry.
I know Native Hawaiian sites on the summit area. Very few. I don't really, with respect to what, I do not have a relative judgment.
Okay. What I'm driving at is that because of the sanctity of Mauna Kea, the reason why people weren't allowed there is because of the sanctity and what that sacred space provides those who do know what they're doing up there and are allowed up there. Because you know it's a sacred area, do you think it's okay to walk into a sacred area and put your stuff there?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Geez, I don't know how to ask this because it's getting to the same question every time, but you keep
Well,
on.
Mr. Fergestrom, as I've said numerous times, I understand you have a point to make. You want to make the point so that I can consider it as evidence.
Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes the witness is not the right one to make those points. There's lots of other witnesses, I imagine including yourself, who will want to testify about that.
Okay,
That would be the best evidence.
okay. Can you tell us why the TMT was, why the Northeastern Plateau was designated for the site of the TMT?
Do not answer.
Objection, lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Okay. Do you believe there can be a bridge between Hawaiian knowledge and scientific knowledge?
Yes.
As the director of the IFA, is it true that you're going to try to move other telescopes, some of the existing telescopes, over to the northwestern slope from Mauna Kea?
No.
No? I'm asking that because on the maps, it shows that the astronomy precinct, where most of the telescopes are located, is pretty much in one little corner. And yet the astronomy precinct goes way across the northern plateau.
Your objection?
Objection, lack of foundation beyond the scope of direct.
And the examiner appears to be testifying again, so if you could please move on.
Let me see how I gotta do this. I'm gonna get to it sooner or later. It's whether or not I can do it now. The Mauna Kea Science Reserve is TMK 4-4-15- or, sorry. Sorry, Gene. The Mauna Kea Science Reserve is task map key 4-4-15.9. That is the Mauna Kea Science Reserve. Is that correct?
Objection, lack of foundation. The cross-examiner is testifying.
Well, I'm looking at the map on the wall. That's what it says, so I'm just wondering if that's what you see also.
It is written on this graph, but I cannot confirm. It's
Okay.
likely. I mean, you read it as well as I read it.
And the little blocked area, or the triangle, I mean the rectangular area, where they have all the different telescopes identified, it's identified as the astronomy precinct. Is that correct?
Yes, so maybe just for reference, we should say what we are looking at in the...
Oh, okay, well,
So
on the map on the wall.
we are looking at the Conservation District Use Permit application, page 1.3, figure 1.2.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Ditto. That's what I was.
I'm
Thank
sorry?
you for the description.
Oh,
So, again, when looking at that map on the wall there, which you described, if you'll notice, all the telescopes, well, if you look at the map and then you see the words astronomy precinct, it gives you kind of a rectangular space that's designated as the astronomy precinct. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a polygon, I would say.
Polygon, okay. Not really good at that math stuff, but. So most of what we're looking at is pretty much on where the telescopes are located. It's pretty much concentrated on the east side that astronomy precinct. Would that be correct?
That's correct. That is where the Summit Ridge is and where the submillimeter valley is.
Okay. To your knowledge, is that entire science area, the astronomy precinct, in the state of Hawaii?
Objection. The questions are repetitive. We would ask for an offer of proof.
What is the point here? Where are we going?
We're going with the whole question of whether or not this whole thing is in the state of Hawaii.
And why is this particular witness the one that needs to answer that question?
Well, I would think that he, being the director of the IFA, and that's a map of the location of the astronomy precinct, that he would have knowledge of whether or not it's in the state of Hawaii.
I'm going to sustain the objection, ask you to move to another question, please.
Okay, we'll get to that sooner or later. It's that elephant in the room I keep talking about.
Mr. Fergestrom, you have any other questions?
Yes, if you give me a chance to look at my notes. Is this STEM program that you folks refer to, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? You talk about a pipeline to education. Is this dependent upon the building of the 30-meter telescope? The
Sorry,
funding?
Is it dependent on the funding? No.
No. Did it exist before we had the application for the CDUA?
Elements of that existed well before.
How about the THINK program?
The Think Fund was developed as a part of the TMT application.
Is there a reason why a lot of the components that are going to be necessary for the 30-meter telescope, is there a reason why they cannot be built in Hawaii?
You mean the components?
Yes, sir.
You know, the countries that are funding the TMT also want to, I mean, they don't want just to pay money, they also want to develop their own industries. And so there are certain elements which are built in every individual country. And parts of it are also developed in Hawaii.
So there's really no reason except for the country's personal economic gain that it cannot be built in Hawaii.
I think.
Just don't answer,
Sorry.
please. The objection
Objection, argumentative.
sustained.
So in considering building the TMT, you state that you have had conversations with cultural practitioners. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you named like Mr. Babayan, Lili Kala, Mr. Sorio.
Mauna Kea, for instance.
Yes. Have you had any conversations with those? Let me just rephrase that. In one of the public demonstrations against the 30-meter telescope, there were 800 Hawaiians on top of the mountain blocking the road. Have you had a chance to talk to any of those 800 who have such deep regard for the mountain that they would get involved in civil disobedience?
Objection, argumentative.
assumes facts not in evidence. So I'm going to sustain the objection on that basis. Go ahead and ask another question, please.
You are aware that there has been many public demonstrations or civil disobedience regarding the construction of the 30-meter telescope. Is that correct?
I would not say many, but a number.
A number of them?
Yes.
Do you think those people who were involved in that civil disobedience were trying to demonstrate to you a deep reverence for Mauna Kea?
Do not answer.
Objection, lack of foundation calls for speculation.
Sustained.
On page 7 of your direct testimony, there is a sentence that says, there are clear signs noting the special and cultural sensitivity of Mauna Kea and asking everyone to be respectful of the mountain. Is that an accurate statement? Does that not include science?
You mean the respect, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would think that, I mean, you're talking about the respectfulness of the mountain, being respectful to the mountain, but it seems to not include the scientific community.
Objection, vague and ambiguous, argumentative.
I sustain an argumentative. I'm not sure, I didn't understand the question.
What I'm trying to get to is that somehow or another it seems that science community has trumped the sacredness of the mountain. And I don't know how they were able to do so, and I'm trying to get to it by asking these questions of understanding the reverence of the mountain.
Does this witness know that?
Well, as the director of IFA, and that's all those telescopes up there, those are the ones that we consider breaching the mountain.
That's your testimony.
Well, it's my observance.
I think it's going to be your testimony. I don't know.
It would probably be, but it's also my observance because those telescopes exist there.
Your observance at this time is not evidence because you're not under oath, you're not the witness. There will be an opportunity for you to put that forth if that's what you believe and you have a basis for that.
Yes.
But this witness is the one that I'm trying to ask you to focus on his testimony and what you need to get from him.
Okay, I think I'm finished. Thank you, Mr. Gunther.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Mr. Fergestrom. And we're going to take a lunch recess, please. It is now 12:14. Let's recess till 1:15, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Contested